To ask you about your first impressions of actually being in power, because you've had several lives. You've been a math teacher, you're a very accomplished economist, you became a political activist, political operative, but until you became minister only a few months ago, you had never actually held political office. And now you are part of a government under the leadership of the President Faye, and the Prime Minister Sonko, that has promised radical and profound change. And it is up to all of you to deliver that change. What have been your first impressions of actually being in power?
A high sense of responsibility. And putting to myself that there is a need for accountability. And this is because of how we came into, governing, leading the country. We went through a very intense process of contestation, of resistance, of young people, lots of people who lost their lives, of people who got incarcerated. I mean, our president came out of a prison with our prime minister a few days before the campaign. We campaigned during Ramadan. And this ocean of young people, masses of people in front of us, cheering with the message of hope. So I had a high sense of lots of responsibility on my shoulder, on the shoulder of the government, of expectations that the Senegalese had, and trust that the Senegalese had. So every morning since then, I tell to myself, make sure you do your very best, and make sure you work hard so that what you have promised the Senegalese and what you have presented as a program, you do your best to do it, and make sure you tell the truth.
Yeah, well, the President and the Prime Minister have raised expectations. They have set expectations very high for their government, the government that you're a part of. But has there been, since you've been in office, has there been anything that has surprised you about actually having your hands on the levers of power, about how it works when you close the door and you're inside the ministry, the ministerial cabinet, the presidential palace, the Prime Minister's office?
Well, yes, indeed. First of all, discovering what you find between what you thought was going on in terms of the books, in terms of the finances, in terms of human resources, in terms of what you thought you were going to find and what you see. I think this is going to be this is what we thought was happening. This is what we proposed as a program based on what we thought was happening and based on the evidence we had in our hands. But this is what the reality tells us. And how do you deal with that?
Meaning, what do you mean by the reality?
Meaning,
you discovered
the reality,
things that you...
First of all, when we were campaigning, we knew there was high level of corruption. We knew there was bad governance. We knew there was distrust in the legal system by the Senegalese. There were a lot of issues of governance, be it financial governance and political and social. We knew also that there was a big disparity between the cities and the rural areas in terms of investment, in terms of attention, in terms of, just taking all of the citizens, be them rural or urban, at the same level. But when you come and you find out really that, for example, the level of debt of Senegal was way much higher than what it is, you wonder, where is the money? What did they do with this?
So you're saying the public accounting was wrong, and the numbers that had been provided by the previous administration with respect to debt, for instance, were untrue?
Were inaccurate at all, totally. So when you find that out, then you have to say, what do we do? We know the consequences of saying that, but what do we do? Do we hide it and continue, or do we tell the truth? I think that was a very major decision. And we said, look, we came here with a lot of hope and a lot of expectation of changing, of a systemic change. And the systemic change starts with behavior, starts with attitudes, starts with really saying what is the reality of the situation. So we decided to go ahead and tell the truth. I also found...
Can I jump in for a second? Because that sounds very noble, but you know what your critics would say? Your critics would say, well, this is a political ploy that is used by most governments when they come into office. They say, actually, the situation is far worse than what we even imagined. And we're telling you it's worse, and we will spend the next few years telling you that we are essentially digging the country out of the hole that the previous administration put it into. And that serves the purpose of the incoming administration.
Well, you can say that when you don't have figures, when you just say the situation is worse without evidence. But when you have statistical evidence and figures, it cannot be told like you are just telling that to make the situation comfortable for you. And I think the Senegalese appreciated that, because at the first, people who are really concerned as the Senegalese citizens, Senegalese people, they appreciated that, they understood that, and they believed that. And what we said was based on facts. They were based on statistical data. They were based on figures. So I think the answer is, of course, how do you now move forward and develop a program that will enable you in a very difficult condition to at least set the stage and realize what you plan to do. Because it's a commitment to the people, but it's a commitment to ourselves also.
Yeah, and your voters, as we said, have high expectations of this president, this prime minister, and your government. We will talk about policy in your program in just a second, but I need to talk about the political personnel at the very top of the Senegalese state, the president and the prime minister. They have a very close political bond, and they have an unusual journey in the sense that the person who is now the prime minister, Ousmane Sonko, was the person who ran for president. He was the natural candidate of the now ruling party, PASTEF. It looked for a while like he was going to be the president. But then, as we know, he was barred from running. He was jailed for the better part of last year. So was the current president, jailed for the better part of last year. And as you mentioned, they were released from jail days before the presidential election earlier in 2024. Because Ousmane Sonko was barred from running, Bassirou Diomaye Faye ran in his stead. And he called himself a substitute candidate. Now he is president. He is at the head of the Senegalese state. And the person whom we thought would be president is under him as prime minister. So the question is, who's running Senegal?
The president is running Senegal. Senegal is being run on the basis of a program that we promised that we are going to put in place. And that program is what we presented a few weeks ago, Senegal Vision 2050. You're running a country on a basis of a program. You're not running a country like you're running an army. You're running a country because you're trying to put in place a program, an agenda for social change. And that's what we have in place. We have a government, of course, because we need institutions, and we have a strong government when you have a president that has his role as a president, and you have a prime minister that is in charge of implementing the program put in place by the government to serve the Senegalese.
What is that system? That's what I'm asking you. How do the decisions get made?
Oh, the decisions get made, first of all, in terms of, when we developed the program, we developed it on the basis of what we found, on the basis of what we call the project, what we promised the Senegalese we are going to do, on the basis of the resources that are available. So the president is not the one who's saying, this is a program. The program is formulated by experts, by people in public policy, and that's the program that the president will approve after he says, yes, this is the program, and the prime minister. So that program is the agenda of Senegal 2050.
The reason I ask you this question, and I know they are on the same page politically. They are from the same party. They are aiming for the same things. And I'm not suggesting otherwise. However, inevitably, at some point, there is going to be disagreement on the vision for Senegal, on public policy, on what to do next, on how to handle a crisis. There is going to be inevitably some disagreement between the president and the prime minister. Who's going to carry the day there's a disagreement?
Disagreement is healthy. Out of disagreement, always a solution comes out. And as long as you disagree and you understand why you are here, where you are, and what you are here for, you can always find a constructive outcome from the disagreement. And that's what I'm seeing. That's the experience I'm living with the president and the prime minister. And I think they complete each other in terms of the program that we are running. And I think they're very conscious of their role and what they want to achieve and how they want to work together to achieve this role.
So let's talk about how you do that. Your government and the president and prime minister won this election And I would point out, by the way, that the president was elected in the first round, 54% of the vote, which nobody expected they would do because there were, give or take, 20 candidates running, and he won in the first round. It's quite remarkable. But they promised to reduce poverty, they promised to fight corruption, and they promised to tackle youth unemployment, which is massive in Senegal. These things are major, and Senegalese voters are expecting your government to deliver. How do you do that?
Well, first of all, I think you have to put institutions at work. You have to, first of all, ensure that Senegalese get reconciled with the justice system, which was a very important step. Because the justice was weaponized, the justice system was used to repress instead of serve the people. We went through a process of reconciling Senegalese with the justice system. You also have to have stronger institutions, especially for fighting corruption. That is a very important area of work to tackle. Meaning that, first of all, putting process that put really transparency in the management of public funds, but also ensuring that anybody who have been responsible for, mishandling, embezzling public funds responds to that, accountability.
Anybody, you say?
Anybody.
Do you have anybody in mind?
I have no one in mind, but the justice system will do its job if that happens. But what we are saying is that there is no exception. Everyone will be on the same level in front of the law.
Some people could listen to what you just said and wonder if that means that PASTEF and your government will go after the previous administration and will use this transparency, accountability, and maybe hunting down any embezzlement that may or may not have occurred, if there is proof.
We've been here for 8 months now. And we just went through legislative elections. Parliament.
Which you won handily.
Which we won 130 seats over 160. But candidates who were here before, who had jailed people, who have done many things, were able to run, to campaign side by us. And we said, let's use due process and democratic processes to, let the Senegalese decide. So if we were going to hunt people, we would not have allowed them to run because we were prevented from running in the last parliamentary election, presidential election, and we didn't do that. So I think that we are not in a manhunt mentality because we have a lot of work to do. And I don't think that, our priority is to really try to do our best to realize, put Senegal forward, to ensure that we do our best to respect commitments we have taken.
So there's no witch hunt from this government against the previous government, under whose authority, I would remind our viewers, Mr. Bassirou Diomaye Faye, the current president, and the Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko spent almost a year in jail. There is no witch hunt.
No one has seen any witch hunt, so there is no witch hunt.
Let's get back to the policy of one of the main, I think, central planks of your government's platform is poverty reduction. This is one of your areas of expertise. As we said, you were an accomplished economist at the United Nations, held various positions. How do you do that? This is a mammoth task. And specifically, what do you say to the countless Senegalese young men who see no future for themselves in Senegal, and who prefer to risk their lives getting on dinghies, crossing parts of the Atlantic Ocean to try and make it to Europe? And we're talking, by the way, about people who have an education, who have degrees, who might be teachers, engineers, etc. What do you say to them?
It's a very painful situation to see. And I think one of the reasons why several of us went into politics is because we feel that Senegal is able to provide employment for its citizens. Senegal is able to ensure that young Senegalese live in Senegal with dignity and can even decide to go on vacation and come back home. We believe that it's possible. How do you do that? Well, first of all, we have to invest in agriculture. Senegal has large potentials of agricultural development that we have not done before. And we feel that we need to invest in agriculture. And agriculture is not only a job provider, but it allowed Senegal to transform a certain agricultural product and export them. To do that, of course, we need to water management. And from the area where I come, we have the lake the big lake of Lac de Guiers that has fresh water, that we are planning important irrigation program that would enable us to provide water to large pieces, areas of land so that we can grow agriculture in a large scale level. With, of course, increasing, really productivity and mechanization of agricultural process, which has been like, really, the farmers are still using very, very rudimentary, basic mechanic agricultural tools. It is also ensuring that Senegal resources benefits the Senegalese first, meaning that we have, iron ore, we have oil and gas, and those resources can be exploited, but can be transformed in Senegal.
Okay, but who is that money going to go to? And for the benefit of our viewers, I would remind everyone that Senegal just this year has entered the club of oil-producing nations. This is very new. Only a few months ago, Senegal began producing oil at an offshore platform. That specific platform, and other oil and gas facilities will come online. That specific platform is owned 80% by the Australian company that has invested in it, Woodside, and 20% by the Senegalese state. The Senegalese Prime Minister and President have both said that is an unfair distribution and they want to renegotiate the contract. How's that going?
Countries have done that in the past. You can sit down and discuss. We are not saying we're going to kick anybody out, but we're going to sit down and discuss. And certainly when you look at contracts, you will certainly find ways to review them so that Senegalese can benefit better. I think that's something that, the lawyers, the experts, in legal and negotiation of contracts can do.
But how is it going? Because that was one of the day one priorities and promises, and you've been in power 8 months.
And we are in the process. We are in process of looking at, several contracts and seeing if there are any loopholes, how Senegal can better benefit. And that is something that we said, and that's something that we will do.
You also said you're not looking to expropriate any private companies or nationalize the sector.
No, I mean looking for, meaning that you target someone and say, okay, I'm going to expropriate you. No. First of all, you look at the contract and see, have the contract been followed properly? Is that the case? Secondly is the contract itself, as it is framed. Does it respect Senegalese interests and the private companies? We're not just in here to kind of, expel or say that private companies did something wrong, but we want to put a level playing field, a win-win contract, so the Senegalese win and also the private companies win. We do that with Woodside, we do that with BP, we do that with any other companies. But in addition to your question, Senegal has other resources. We have the most important natural gas resource in Senegal has not been exploited. And that will enable us to sign a very interesting, for us and for the private sectors that are coming, agreement that will benefit both Senegal and the private sector companies that are going to come to exploit. The other way that you're asking about, employment of young people is transformation of resources. We know that we have natural gas, we have phosphate. You can put already a factory of transforming, of creating, fertilizers, of creating urea and other products that are important for agriculture on one way, but also the create employment. Because industry and transformation companies, enterprises, is what really enable you to create employment, create jobs. So I think that what Senegal says it's going to be doing is doable. The vision is clear in the 2050. And one of the things that have been very, very, very difficult in many countries is really transparency. A transparent process, a process of accountability, having a vision over time and giving yourself a pace of 5 years like we do until the 25 years or the 2050 vision. And I think that that is very important. The other area where I think is very important for employment, if I may continue, is really we have a big disparity between the cities and the urban areas. And we want to set up what we call, really these poles of development, because every region of Senegal has some potential of development. But just to end again, Senegal is a gateway. This is a market of young people.
Half the population is under the age of 18.
75% of the population is less than 35 years. The medium age is 19 years old. So these young people are buyers, they are creators, they are generators, they are workers. So it's a market. And Senegal is a gateway also for West Africa. We have ECOWAS, which is 500 million people. In 2050, it will be 1 billion people. So this is a huge market that also investor will be interested in coming, and investor will be interested also in entering this market and agreeing with people who are from those countries have to benefit from the resources that these countries generate.
I've been remiss because I haven't yet asked you about Senegal's relations with the former colonial ruler, France. Those relations going forward. What are those going to look like? Because a central plank of your political platform has been to reset relations between Senegal and France. Specifically, the president has said recently in the French press that he wants the French soldiers to leave. There are about 350 French soldiers, 2 military bases in Dakar. He wants them to leave. Is there a timeline for that?
Well, the timeline, I'm not going to sit here in Al Jazeera and give it to you, I don't think. I think the timeline will be
Tell us
discussed.
what those conversations are like then.
Yeah,
At least the tone of the conversations between Senegal and France under this presidency.
I think the tone of conversation is healthy. I mean, we've been, since the president
what does that
came in
mean
power,
for
we've been in
Senegal?
France twice. I mean, saying that the army that is in your country need to go back to their country doesn't mean that you are, harassing them or you are impolite. It's just a form of saying that I am a sovereign country and I am entitled to defend myself, and I can defend myself.
Well, have they agreed to leave?
Well, is this, I mean,
The
what do
president
you mean
says
by agree?
The president has said that there will no longer be French soldiers in Senegal. So that would require the soldiers to leave. Have they notified?
It requires a discussion. I mean, but that is something that is a given. I don't think that, at this stage in 2024, knowing Senegal and the Senegal we live, there will be any question of a country saying, I'm not leaving. I don't think, I think France is a old partner, an existing partner of Senegal.
But they're being kicked out.
The army, the French army is leaving. Asking the French army to leave doesn't mean you are kicking the French up. I mean, I don't think the French sees it as you do.
Well, about that, when you see a French diplomat walk through the door, you're foreign minister of Senegal, what do you see? Do you see a friend? Do you see an ally? Do you see a rival? Do you see an exploiter? What do you see?
I see a diplomat.
That's not an answer.
When you say that if I see a French diplomat walk through out the door, coming to see me, I see a diplomat that I can sit down and talk with, a civil discussion. The diplomat that comes to defend its interest, and the Senegalese Minister of Foreign Affairs that defend the interests of Senegal and the interests of West Africa and Africa. That's what I see. And then we sit down and talk. It's always, out of conversation, we always can find consensus. But it's up to us to say what we want. It's up to us to negotiate and discuss until we find a common ground.
And what do you want?
Doesn't
What
mean
does Senegal
aggressivity.
want? What does that relationship look like going forward?
Oh, I mean, I think that the relationship right now in Senegal what we are saying is that we have several partners in the world. Senegal is open to partnership. And we are not a colony, we are an independent country, we are a sovereign country. And like any sovereign country, you have the liberty to partner, to negotiate, to discuss, to exchange with everyone else. I mean, it's even surprising to me, honestly, to be asked questions like, how do the French feel when you decide you're going to have another partner? I mean, even though I've lived long enough
not the question
to understand, I understand, but it's just such a surprise as an African woman, as someone who has traveled the world, who has seen so many developing countries be independent, from Bolivia to Vietnam to South Africa and to West Africa, and to be told, how would you feel if the French army leaves your country? I'll feel okay. And I think the French should feel okay. I think they will feel okay. But the France I see today will feel very happy when they, to have a partnership with Senegal that is equitable, that is transparent, that is fair, and that is polite. And mind you, I mean, this is what discourse we say to everyone. We are not against anybody, but we are like every country, Senegal's interest first, like any other country. And I think that every African is feeling that way, especially African youth. Africa's interest first. Of course, defending that interest is a process. There are things that we have to get. There are places you want to go. It's a process. But it doesn't mean that we are against other people. There's a proverb that saying that I love myself doesn't mean that I don't like you.